How many decisions do you think you make in a day? 5, 10, 20, 50? You might think, oh, I have a simple life, I don't make that many decisions. Well, you should think again, because no matter how simple your life is, the number of decisions you make in a day is as many as thousands, or maybe even tens of thousands.
For example, let's look at my day. When my alarm went off, I hit snooze. That was the first decision. At the second alarm, I decided to wake up. I could have instantly gotten out of bed, but I didn't. I chose to look at my phone. I scrolled through social media. Technically, for every second I didn't get out of social media, I was making the decision to keep scrolling, until finally, I decided to stop and put my phone away. Then, I got up. I thought, should I brush my teeth? That's a tough decision. I always tend to justify not brushing my teeth in the morning because I always brush it in the evening. And that's probably enough, I say to myself, subconsciously. But guess what? It's not enough. My dentist told me to brush my teeth twice a day. So I shouldn't try to justify my bad decisions. Okay, brushing my teeth, I told myself subconsciously. Then, should I make my bed or not? Okay, let's make the bed today. Maybe I should change my PJs, but I don't have to because I will work from home today. Morning coffee or tea? I'm drinking way too much coffee. I should cut down on it, but well, let's go with coffee anyway. Should I work before breakfast? Oh, I got a text. Does this text make me angry or happy? Feelings are in a sense subtle decisions, because even if I got angry, I could choose to empathize and calm my anger. Anyways, should I respond right away or should I wait? How should I respond? What words to choose and in what particular order? Should I apply for this job?
Now you probably understand why the number of decisions you make every single day is so huge. Every single action or lack thereof is a direct manifestation of a decision, conscious or unconscious. When you truly grasp that, you can see how your entire life and even your personality is a direct result of the decisions you have made throughout your life. Making the right decisions is probably the most important skill that shapes our lives. And looking at the scientific data about workings of human brain, we can come to the conclusion that when it comes to decision making, we humans, to put it formally, suck. Let me explain. The decisions we make are directly related to the way we perceive the world. Under certain conditions, our minds tend to distort objective reality so much that it causes us to make terrible decisions. As you probably guess, we don't consciously decide to act terribly, but rather our brain tricks us into thinking that terrible action is the most reasonable thing to do at that moment. I know this statement was kind of abstract, so let's dive a bit deeper. We're social beings, and it makes us feel good to fit in with a group of people. But how far do you think we can go to adapt to a group? Do you think we could knowingly make mistakes just because others are doing it? Or even in a clearly life-threatening situation, if those around us act as if nothing's wrong, do you think we can risk our lives just to adapt to the group? Well, the experiments show that the answer to both of these questions is yes.
Neuroeconomist Berns recruited volunteers for what he advertised as a vision experiment. The participants were shown 2 images of computer-generated 3D objects. The task was to identify whether or not the 2 images were of the same object from different angles. There was a trick though. 4 of the 5 participants were part of the research team, and they intentionally gave wrong answers to specific questions which could be seen by the real subject in the room. The question was this: would the subject be influenced by the wrong answers? The subjects responded to questions in 2 settings, alone and with the group. The data shows that the subjects gave the wrong response 41% of the time within a group that gives wrong answers, but only 13% when deciding by themselves. In almost all cases, they felt their answers were correct. Only 3.4% of the subjects said that they had known the right answer, but went along with the group anyway. This result shows that they were not consciously giving wrong answers, but the error was happening on a subconscious level. It's found that 30% of the subjects answered correctly every time, despite the contradictory responses given by others. MRI scans revealed that this act of standing alone caused participants great discomfort. It also activated the parts of the brain which is associated with negative emotions, such as fear and apprehension. By contrast, those participants whose answers aligned with others activated a different part of the brain that's responsible for our basic senses, what we see, hear, taste, and feel. Knowing the answers from the others caused their brains to subconsciously alter what they saw. Based on this changed perception, they then were in accordance with the others, avoiding the pain they otherwise would have experienced.
How about the life-threatening conditions? For this, let's look at a section of a 2010 episode of NBC's Dateline. What were you thinking?
The setting is this. The NBC rented the 4th floor of an old building. The floor is filled with the NBC staff pretending to be new workers. Then they hire temp workers and give them a form to fill out within the room with other fake workers. As in all psychology experiments, the subjects don't know what's really going on. While they're filling out the forms, a smoke starts filling the room. The fake workers act as if nothing is happening. Of course, the smoke isn't lethal, but the real subjects don't know that. It appears that the building is on fire. Can you guess what the subjects do? Answer is nothing. 90% of them didn't respond to the massive smoke that's filling the room because they didn't see anyone reacting to the situation.
This is like herd psychology. We can't say this is a conscious act to fit in. No one would consciously decide to die just to fit into a group. But the point here is that the mind has the potential to distort reality for social conformity, even to the point of complete destruction. So, what do these examples show us? If social conformity plays a huge role in our decision-making mechanisms, is it possible that in even the most important decisions of our lives, we might tend to make the wrong decisions for the sake of conformity? Is it possible that just because of our lack of courage to be different, we pick paths similar to those around us at the expense of never finding out who we truly are? And as a result, can we be condemning ourselves to live in the grip of regrets and unhappiness that will eat away at us for the rest of our lives? Well, debatable, of course, but just some things to think about. In order to make a decision, we need to compare, and in order to compare, we look for a reference point. But our minds are sometimes, actually most of the times, very incompetent about picking the right reference points. Let's turn to another experiment to understand this concept better.
At the beginning of this experiment, participants are given a presentation on the real estate market, after which they're asked to write down the last 3 digits of their phone number multiplied by 1,000 on a piece of paper. They are then asked to make an estimate of house prices. Participants' estimates appear to be heavily influenced by their phone number multiplied by 1,000. Despite being presented about the market, they were still heavily influenced by the random number.
This wrong comparison mechanism of the mind is also used in many marketing strategies, pricing, discount strategies, and much more. Are you ready to switch to the dark side of science? The Milgram Experiment is an extremely famous and controversial experiment conducted by Stanley Milgram in the 1960s. The purpose of this experiment is to figure out whether people give up their moral values in order to obey authority.
To briefly describe the experiment, the participants are told that there will be an experiment on learning, and they'll be paid for an hour of their time. The experiment consists of 3 people: the experimenter, who's in charge of the session, who's also wearing white lab coat to represent the authority figure, the teacher, who's volunteer for a single session, and the learner, who's the paid actor on the research team. Teacher and learner come to the session together and they draw straws to determine who will take each role. But in reality, there is only one participant. As I mentioned, the person playing the learner role is a trained actor, and the experiment is designed so that each time the participant will always be the teacher. Afterwards, the learner is tied to an electric chair in a separate room where the teacher can't see him, but hear him. The setting of the experiment is this. The teacher will ask questions to the learner. If the learner gives wrong answers, the teacher will be administered to give electric shocks. Each subsequent incorrect answer means that the teacher has to increase the voltage. If the participant wants to quit, the white jacket experimenter, playing the role of authority, will inform the teacher to continue using the following predetermined prods. Please go on. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. The prods will always be made in sequence. Only if prod 1 is unsuccessful, prod 2 will be used. If the subject refuses to obey the experiment after prod 4, the experiment will be terminated. The experimenter's tone of voice is at all times firm, but not impolite. By the way, prior to the experiment, psychologists estimated that no more than 1 to 3% of participants would keep going until the high-level shocks. That is, only those who are sadistic and prone to violence. Keep this preliminary information in mind. Then the experiment begins. The student is in the next room that the participant cannot see. Of course, there isn't really an electric current delivered, but just like all the other experiments, the participant doesn't know that. With each increasing current, the student responds a little more with shouting and such. At some point, he starts screaming and punching walls, and above 300 volt level, he is unresponsive. The result of the experiment is 65% of the participants obeyed the authority till the end. Most of the participants showed high levels of distress, but despite that, they still continued to obey without refusal. We tend to see things easier than they are. We overestimate what we can do. We have a tendency to ignore difficulties or possible negative consequences. We focus on the reward so much that we tend to overlook all the opposing evidence. To prove you that, let's look at an example from the Second World War. It was the beginning of the Second World War. Allies had to launch an airstrike to win. But the American generals were in a dilemma. How could they hit military targets with precision? Carl Norden, a very proud Swiss engineer, thank you very much, promised a solution. Norden Bombsight, he claimed, could hit a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. America was so excited and bought $30 billion Norden Bombsight in today's money. Well, it turned out to be a terrible decision. 90% of the bombs missed the target. And the funnier thing is, there was overwhelming evidence that this would happen. The bomb was too complex to use. It required cloudless weather. The plane had to have a slow speed and a low altitude. The precision of the bomb relied on conditions that were clearly impossible for a real war. But all high-ranking officers believed that it would work because the idea of it working well was so exciting that they subconsciously chose to overlook all the evidence that shows otherwise. It should be noted here that optimism is necessary for success. Duke economists Puri and Robinson report that optimists work harder and longer hours, which may account for their high pay. Indeed, optimism has been linked to achievement in education, business, sports, and electoral politics. In a recent paper, present a computational model suggesting that blah blah, so you get the point. Optimism is not a terrible thing. The problematic situation is not optimism, but rather the blindness towards clear evidence. This is probably the most obvious one that we are all aware of, the desire for instant gratification, taking an action just to fulfill an instant need without considering its long-term effects. Examples could be sending a text when angry, being reactive, saying the first thing that comes to mind without filtering, going to the supermarket when hungry, and making the wrong purchase, etc., etc., etc. The obvious mistakes that we're all familiar with. So, the big question, what should we do? I think it's a good start to be aware of these faulty states of our minds.
practicing being more intentional with our actions, I think, would help us in the long term. This is also something that I've had progress with. Also, taking full responsibility while making decisions may also be helpful. The reason I decided to make this video is I was on the edge of making a decision, and then I started self-reflecting. I started thinking about all the wrong decisions that I made in my life, and there were a lot of them actually. So I decided to look further into this topic, and I found a lot of things, and I thought knowing these would be helpful for a lot of people to make better decisions in the future. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and like and subscribe and do all those stuff if you like the video, and see you in the next one. Thanks.